Jasmine and I started dating after a camp retreat we went to in September of 2016. Before going to the retreat, she wasn't feeling very well and almost chose to stay home, but she decided that she didn't want her cancer to dictate her life. I was just getting over a previous relationship that went for a year and a half and was content with being single. I didn't want and wasn't looking for another relationship, but when I saw Jasmine at the camp, I realized there was someone that I wanted to be with. I knew how amazing she was because I had already heard her story of fighting terminal cancer for the past 2 years. She seemed so brave, I couldn't believe how positive she was about her situation. So we hung out that whole weekend, and as I got to know her more, I wanted to be around her more. She never talked about her cancer. She never complained, even though she was in pain and was taking painkillers whenever she could. Nobody knew she was in so much discomfort because, once again, she didn't want it to be about her. Throughout the weekend, I was able to finally get to know her a bit. I was able to see her sense of humor and how she treated everyone. Eventually, the weekend came to an end, and we had to say our goodbyes. As I was driving home with my brother, he asked about me and Jasmine and if I liked her. He saw how we hung out together the whole weekend and knew I had an interest in her. So I told him that I was definitely interested in her. He then asked about her cancer and if she still had it or not. I told him I didn't ask her and that I assumed she was still terminal. His next question was, would you be okay with dating someone with cancer? To which I said, yeah, I think so. I don't want to miss out on someone like her. What if she does get healed and I lost the opportunity to be with her because I was too scared of her cancer? And that's when I really knew that I was going to pursue her afterwards. We lived almost 4 hours apart from each other, so I decided to start messaging her on social media the next day. It was mostly small talk and just a way for us to stay in touch, but then my friend who went to school near her asked if I could come get him and give him a ride back home. I immediately saw the opportunity to hang out with Jazz and told him yes. I told Jazz what was happening and we made a last-minute plan to hang out. So I drove down on a Friday early in the morning and spent almost the whole day with her. At this point, Jasmine wasn't completely sure of me. She liked who I seemed to be while I was at camp, but she knew that many people act differently at camp than in real life. After the day had ended and I had left, Jasmine went to her mother and told her she met the man she was going to marry. I can't believe how quickly she knew that she wanted to marry me. 2 weeks later, she had a hockey tournament where I was from. So we provided her with a place to stay for the weekend. My family was skeptical because, like I said, I was just getting over my past relationship. My mother was apparently furious because she couldn't believe I could do this to them. When my brother and I got back from that weekend at camp where Jazz and I started hanging out, my mother asked my brother if I had met someone. He told her that I did, and then she asked what he thought of her. His response was, "Have you ever met someone who seems like they have an angel living inside of them?" And although my mother found that really nice and reassuring, she was still upset with me. So after Jasmine came for that visit and played hockey, she was just driving out of the driveway when my mother turned to me and said, "Ethan, if you mess this one up, we're disowning you." And she was joking, of course, but she was really just saying they really liked her. My mother finally saw what Devin described. During that weekend, Jazz and I finally had time to talk with each other, and I found out that she was indeed still terminal and that the cancer had only grown and never shrunk. She told me that she had adrenocortical carcinoma that metastasized to her lungs. She wanted me to hear that before we started officially dating. She thought she'd never find love. She thought that she was just a girl with cancer that everyone would be too scared to be with. So she just assumed that she was going to be single until, well, possibly the day that she died. But for the next 2.5 months, we took turns visiting each other, going back and forth almost every other weekend. When New Year's came, she invited me to go out to her family's camp or cottage to be there with her friends, and we would stay the night to celebrate the New Year. While we were there, 2 of her friends who were married jokingly asked us when we were going to get married. Jazz and I looked at each other, laughed a little bit, and she jokingly said that we were going to elope in May. So I played along, and her friend said, "Can you guys actually do that? Like, please, like, actually do that." Eventually, the conversation changed, and we moved on from the topic. But once we had some time alone, she brought up what they said and asked what I thought. We talked about it for a while and concluded that both of us liked the idea of marriage. It was a crazy thing to think about considering we had only been together for just under 3 months, but we knew we loved each other and didn't see a reason for us to wait. So we went home and talked to our parents. I brought it up to my mother and she was immediately supportive. She explained how much she liked the idea and that I would continue to have support from my parents until I was done school, even if I was married. I remember crying because I was just so happy with my mom's reaction to that and what she thought of it. Jasmine's parents had a slightly different reaction. They were coming back from a night out, and she sat them down to ask what they thought of us getting married, and immediately her mother said, "What? No." And I mean, of course that was the reaction. Your 19-year-old daughter who's sick with cancer wants to get married to some boy that she's only known for 3 months. So to think of that, it is really just crazy. But right after her mom said no, her dad said, "Sherry, let's go for a drive." So they went out for a drive. And he talked to her. When they got back, Sherry was supportive and told Jasmine that she thought it was awesome that we wanted to get married. So after finding out that we had all the support from our parents, I knew I had to propose soon. Jasmine liked surprises, and the only way I could think of to surprise her was to do it right away. So I immediately started looking for a ring and organized a dinner with her dad so I could get his blessing. Within 2 weeks of talking to our parents, I got the ring and got her father's blessing. After the dinner I had with him, I drove to their place and proposed. Jasmine had no idea. I completely surprised her. About a month before I did that, she texted me one day and jokingly said, "Hey, you should drive here right now and just come give me a hug." And she was really just saying, "I miss you." And I responded, "Hey, someday I'm actually gonna do that. You're gonna say that again and I'll actually drive there and give you a hug." So when I got to her parents' place, I called her on the phone. We talked often, so it wasn't weird for me to call her. And we were just chatting. And I eventually got the conversation to a point where she said, "Hey, you should come here right now and give me a hug." And I said, "Okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that right now." And she was like, "Okay." And I was like, "All right, well, I'm gonna drive there. I'm gonna get there kind of late, but I'll come give you a hug." And she was like, "All right." And in her voice, I could kind of hear her like, "Is he about to hang up on me? Like, he's actually saying, this sounds like he's saying goodbye." And I hung up and immediately rung the doorbell. And I could hear her screaming. She went down the stairs, opened the door, didn't even see that I was on my knee holding a ring. She hugged me, leaned back, and then I asked her if she would marry me. And she screamed, slid down the side of the door, and said yes. After that, Jazz got to work on organizing our wedding. I'll admit I barely had a hand in doing that, but she had a lot of time and she wanted to do that anyway. Throughout our engagement, she had a lot of ups and downs with her health, but she still pushed through and organized a wonderful wedding. I remember on the day before our wedding at the rehearsal dinner, she was in a lot of pain. We were worried about her having to deal with it the next day on our wedding, but she woke up feeling great. The wedding went smoothly. Our cheeks were sore from all the smiling and happiness. Seeing her walk down the aisle was surreal. She looked perfect. I almost cried, like my eyes filled up with tears a little bit. None of them ran down my face because I sucked them back. I didn't want to cry in front of that many people. But anyway, we said our vows, took our pictures, and danced at the reception. It was a beautiful day. After the wedding, we went on a Caribbean cruise for our honeymoon and then went through the rest of our crazy story together. So that's really the summary of our love story. Marrying Jasmine was the best decision that I ever made. Although she's gone, she made an impact on my life and hopefully on yours. So thank you for listening to this part of the story. It's definitely not the end of what I'm going to tell all of you, but I hope it encourages you to be kind, to love everyone, and to live your life like Jasmine did.